Good afternoon, and thank you for joining this webinar exploring how brands are evolving their connected TV, video, and audio advertising strategies to drive consumer engagement and conversions. Following this discussion, we'll have some time for Q&A, so please take advantage of that. You don't have to wait until the end to submit your questions. You can add them at any point during the session through the Questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform. Everyone registered will also get a recording of this webinar in their inbox tomorrow, should you miss anything or want to revisit any part of the conversation. So today's guests are Brandon Langevin, Sales Director at StackAdapt. Brandon is a Senior Sales Director at StackAdapt, which is an omni-channel demand-side platform, helping agencies and brands reach their target audience across various channels and formats. He is primarily responsible for leading a team of account executives and assisting in high-level media strategy and execution across key accounts. We also have Mark Shannon, Senior Manager of Client Services at StackAdapt. Mark has 10 years of experience in media and advertising, having supported full funnel advertising campaigns for everything from local SMBs to national enterprise level businesses. Mark currently leads a team of account managers dedicated to providing remarkable customer support and campaign execution. And with that, we'll get started. Brandon, take it away.
Thanks a lot, Ian, and hello everybody. Happy Thursday or Friday Junior. Mark and I are very excited to talk about the connected TV OTT space today and its evolution from where it was 3 years ago to where we are now and where we see the industry going in the future. And we're going to break this presentation up into several parts. So if we go forward and look at our table of contents today, we're going to start by talking about the infrastructure of the CTV OTT environment and use that as a baseline for the rest of the conversation. And then we're going to trickle into performance CTV, where CTV was 3 years ago to where it is today. And then Mark is going to take over and talk about some specific tactics you can look at for success. And then finally talk about what's next within the programmatic industry as a whole. But to kick things off, we can start by talking about the definition of CTV and OTT and the two major categories of consumption in the digital television space. So to start, there is still a lot of confusion and related terms around CTV and OTT as a whole, and we find that it always helps to give a clear definition to both, where the terms are often interchangeable, but they actually mean different things. And if we were to refer to OTT first, that generally is a term that describes the delivery of TV content through the internet and over the standard closed TV system. Viewers don't need a subscription to a traditional cable or satellite provider to be able to watch the television content via OTT. And this means that OTT programming includes all the content that's streamed over the internet. Going further than that, OTT video content is delivered in a streaming or video on demand format. Some of the popular OTT services include Netflix, Hulu, Crave, Amazon Prime, and many others. Lots of well-known entertainment conglomerates are now launching their own OTT services. And as a great baseline example, Disney's OTT service called Disney Plus launched in 2019. In 2020, NBC Universal launched their OTT service called Peacock. And we're very much expecting that trend to increase as the years go on. And I think personally, it's important to emphasize here that users overall don't need a subscription to traditional cable or pay TV services to access OTT content. And OTT as a whole is a term that describes the delivery of TV content through the internet and over the standard closed TV system. As a whole, that's what we consider OTT generally. When we're talking about connected television, that is simply referring to a TV that is connected to the internet. And for the most part, there are three different ways to do it. You'll either have a television that has a direct internet connection, otherwise known as smart TVs. We see a lot of people still streaming through various gaming consoles like an Xbox or a PlayStation, or you'll have a set-top box that provides an internet connection to a non-smart TV. And some you could think of would be an Apple TV, an Amazon Fire Stick, a Google Chromecast, a Roku device, etc. But as a whole, those are the two standard definitions that we think are important to get out of the way before we talk about anything else. And before we move on to talking about why CTV and why now, I think it's also very important to call out that the connected TV and OTT space as a channel as a whole is still very much in its infancy, where 4 years ago, this was not even part of most media planning discussions at all. And today, it's taking the industry by storm. So if we move on and start talking about what trends we're seeing in the CTV space as a whole, I think it's pretty clear that CTV consumption is growing. And by roughly 2024, 50% of all TV consumption is going to happen digitally. This is giving advertisers unparalleled access to a growing supply of inventory, and combining that with the very strong and sophisticated infrastructure of digital advertising gives agencies and brands unparalleled access to a user that they wouldn't have had otherwise through general linear TV consumption, and also apply the sophistication of planning and executing a programmatic campaign to the most lean back environment possible. And if we move forward a little bit and start talking about CTV viewers, if we had this conversation 3 years ago and I was presenting 3 years ago, my narrative probably would have been very different. I would have very much pumped up that CTV is a great way to access millennials that are consuming content primarily in a connected TV environment, an OTT environment that you otherwise wouldn't be able to reach. And it's a great way to pass a message to an up and coming generation that has very different consumption habits than who we're used to targeting, like millennials, baby boomers, etc. But the reality is that the CTV audience has matured. And now the median age of CTV viewers in the US is 45 years old. And like I said, CTV is typically thought of as a way to reach young audiences, but all ages and all audiences are now watching CTV at scale. Moreover, time spent consuming connected television content has drastically increased. With all of that as a whole, we can now transition a little bit and talking about measuring success, where we recently conducted a pretty awesome survey in tandem with Digiday, with a report coming out shortly, to get better insight into how agencies and brands view connected television as a part of their overall media mix and what it means to plan and moving forward. And one of the first questions we asked was, when did you start buying on CTV? And I think understanding the answer to this question really puts into perspective everything else we're going to talk about today, which is that over 80% of respondents to this survey said that they haven't bought CTV for more than 3 years. And if we think about the age of the internet and how long media buying has been going on, it's really a clear indication that connected TV is just starting to develop its level of sophistication that could then match a campaign you would execute in a desktop or mobile environment. And that for us is really exciting, because with that brings a lot of consistent innovation, new ideas, and new ways to measure success. And if we continue to look at various survey responses we asked when conducting the survey with Digiday as a whole, we're seeing that much larger portions of overall media budgets are now being allocated to CTV as a whole. And this means that there are going to be continually more opportunities to develop and advance CTV sophistication. And all of this shift in investment, in our opinion, is coming from better measurement, better audience targeting, and better cross-channel attribution that provides level of sophistication around audience targeting and reporting that you otherwise wouldn't be able to access. Now, we've set the stage for what CTV and OTT is and where it came from, but now I want to talk a little bit about where it's going. And now we're going to transition a little bit into performance CTV. And looking back at 3 years ago, we like to call the emergence of CTV around 2018 as CTV 1.0. where it was really exciting when it came to market. I was excited. It's a new channel. It's a new way to expose audiences. But there were still a ton of limitations. And for one, barriers to entry were often seen as far too high, where to justify allocating a tremendous amount of budget to a largely unproven channel with very little measurement capabilities was still a big hurdle for agencies and brands to climb. And second to that, measurement was really non-existent. So in CTV 1.0, people were throwing budget at a channel that had a ton of hype, but didn't produce a lot of measurable results that we were used to from our online campaigns. And obviously, that was a huge problem for our industry, where you had unparalleled access to an audience that you couldn't capture in a linear television space, but there was really no answer to how to measure its success. But over the past 3 years, there's been a ton of innovation in the connected television space that's allowed various partners to really advance performance metrics, measurement solutions, and cross-channel attribution as a whole. And that's what at StackAdapt we call CTV 2.0. And we no longer look at CTV as more of a vanity metric upper funnel channel, but for us, we look at CTV as an outcome-focused initiative and oftentimes take a backwards approach to how we would plan out a connected television campaign. And with that, I want to share a little bit more insight into how we work with media buyers and planners when they're thinking about activating CTV. And for that, we have somewhat of a basic formula where when we look at a CTV campaign, we try to go beyond its basic benefits of mass reach on lean back environments. We want to understand what the goals are, which we define as what stage of the funnel they're at, how we're going to measure those goals, whether it's an upper funnel campaign or a lower funnel campaign, what are the KPIs associated with it and how we're going to measure it. And then follow that with a vertical strategy of who are we trying to capture, how are we going to capture them, and how are we going to do so in a way that's going to help move the needle for a user's content consumption or path to purchase, depending on the vertical itself. And to give it a bit more of a contextualized example to what I'm talking about here, we built one that was very specific to the B2B space, where I think more than any, trying to advertise on connected TV in the B2B space has been a pretty tough challenge for advertisers, going back to CTV's overall exposure. And in this case, if we were to tackle a B2B campaign as a whole, we'd first want to understand what stage of the funnel we were looking to capture with a CTV campaign as a whole, and what does that user's consumer journey look like from initial exposure down to white paper download or demo request or whatever it might be. And with that, if we've identified that the goal of this B2B campaign is to try to get in front of net new users, we would then want to identify what type of audience they were looking to target, and whether that be partnering with a really strong third-party audience provider in the B2B space like Bombora or Dun & Bradstreet, or making some domestically within the StackAdapt platform as a whole. We're now confident that because all of the audience targeting capabilities have become a lot more advanced, the cross-channel attribution of activating a third-party B2B segment within the connected television space would give us equal opportunity and equal performance as if we were to do it in the online environment. And once we figured all of that out, we would then try to define measurement. And in the connected television space, there's a lot of ways to look at success beyond impression delivery. And with the inconsistency in show level data within the bid stream itself, we try to find ways to measure success outside of basic KPIs you would see on any platform. In this case, we thought serving a brand lift study to everybody exposed to a CTV campaign to measure exposed impact to a campaign might make a lot of sense. In other cases, we've looked at cross-channel lift of how a connected TV campaign then transitioning into display or video might make more impact on those channels as a whole. And then in some cases, it could even go as far as measuring conversions from CTV exposure as a whole. But at StackAdapt, when we're having a conversation around connected television, it's no longer talking about a channel that's isolated to one area, but how we can leverage connected TV as a whole to influence the entire marketing journey and how we measure that and how we determine success. So with that, I want to pass it off to Mark, who's going to talk a little bit more about specific tactics that we look at when we're measuring success as a whole.
Thanks, Brendan. So at StackAdapt, our account teams are always working for our customers. We're always trying to find new ways that we can bring your campaigns to the next level. Now, whether that's through incredible inventory or considered campaign executions, we're constantly searching for those new executions. Now, when it comes to CTV, that work doesn't just stop at the impression. So let's take a look at some of the ways that we can empower you to run successful CTV campaigns from start to finish. So one of the things that I first up want to call attention to, not only to CTV, but to CTV's place in your advertising funnel. So I'm sure that we can all acknowledge that anything operating in a silo is at a disadvantage versus campaigns that are working in collaboration with other tactics. And in addition to being able to use the same powerful targeting capabilities as any other ad type on our platform, CTV in your advertising funnel lends incredibly well to being used to fuel your lower funnel retargeting pools. So to execute on this, you can tell your brand story at the top of the funnel effectively with CTV. Then we can collect audiences based on video quartiles. Now, I normally recommend 75% to 100% completion points as a good starting point. And then we can serve ads to those very same users using native, display, standard video, or even audio retargeting on other devices, such as desktop, mobile, or tablet. Now, to do this, StackAdapt relies on an in-house identity graph solution that ensures that we are reaching the same user with a very high degree of accuracy. Okay, so let's think of some of the tactics that we can use for this. We know that most audiences these days likely are using more than one screen at a time. Our attention spans have, pretty much shortened these days. So you can capitalize on those short attention spans by targeting mobile users with as little as a 1 hour look back window. So this ensures that your brand message stays relevant yet differentiated, encouraging engagement while those users are engaging with the content that they're normally going to watch anyway. Now, perhaps you want to target a longer consumer journey. Retargeting from CTV completion with longer look-back windows, let's say 15 to 30 days or even beyond, allows you to serve multiple retargeting impressions to these captured audiences, giving you the opportunity to push them further down the funnel to, of course, complete your desired actions. Now, what are those actions? Well, measuring conversions in CTV is also, of course, a very important part of this whole strategy. And the best part of our in-house identity graphing solution that I mentioned just moments earlier is that it enables us to not only fuel and use retargeting audiences for your campaigns, but we can also measure view-through conversions as a result of CTV exposure. Now, this provides you with even more actionable metrics to optimize your campaigns and to make more informed planning decisions in the future. Now, all that's, fine and dandy, but we of course want to have a way to report on this stuff. With StackAdapt, the reporting experience that our users are already familiar with is used for CTV campaigns as well. Now, this allows you to provide you with a level of transparency that you've come to expect from StackAdapt, with details on all of the relevant metrics, such as spend, impressions, conversion rate, cost per completed view, and even clicks for some of those clickable OTT environments. Now, it's important to note, we don't use tail aggregates. So if we've served a single impression on a piece of inventory, I can guarantee you that you're going to see it in our report. And you'll, of course, still have full access to all of our bulk ad export and scheduling reporting features. And CTV reporting is, of course, compatible with our many third-party reporting integrations. Now, show-level reporting is also something that we're quite often asked about. And for this level of detail, we can execute on these types of campaigns with this level of reporting through certain PMP deals that our solutions team can pull this reporting for you. Generally, due to the inconsistencies that we receive in the bid stream level data, it's not something that we always offer on the open market, but we can absolutely execute this through deal IDs for you. If you're interested in that, all you have to do is get in touch. Now, when it comes to attribution as well, keeping a grip on your audience's entire user journey, Connected TV helps to tie your top of the funnel campaigns seamlessly with bottom of funnel campaigns as users move all the way through that funnel. It further expands your pool of qualified users, making them usable in your other programmatic channels to know exactly who's engaging with your content and who's acting on it. Your measurement and attribution can then become even stronger through the use of recording on-site conversion actions, as I mentioned earlier, site traffic measurement, and even brand and sales lift studies that Brendan mentioned earlier. So in sum, from initial exposure to retargeting and frequency control to attribution, Connected TV with StackAdapt really provides you with a clear picture and a lot of control over your full marketing mix. Brandon?
Thanks, Mark. And I think it's pretty clear over the past 20 minutes or so that in the past 3 years, the status or state or infrastructure in the connected television or OTT space has come miles. And it's pretty exciting for advertisers, brands, and platforms like ourselves to see what we can now leverage in the connected TV space versus what we could 2 to 3 years ago. But with that said, we're of the opinion that there's still a long way to go. And over the next year, 2 years and beyond, there are a lot of big expectations from our industry of what the next step of connected television looks like. And for the next couple of minutes, I want to talk about what. And I think the first thing that the industry as a whole is trying to tackle is more consistency in bid stream level data, where right now it's very hard for a demand side platform or a supply side platform to pick out show level transparency in every bid that's coming through the bid stream. And with that causes a general problem where a lack of show level data can sometimes be something that's a hard hurdle to overcome when you're talking to a brand. With that said, there are some stopgap solutions in place where various partners or publishers have created deal ID transactionable private marketplace deals where you're only going to be serving on inventory that we know beforehand is going to serve show level data. But I think an expectation as bid stream level data increases and improves as a whole is that in the coming years, advertisers, brands, and platforms are going to start to get a lot more transparency and control over what specific shows and content they're serving on in any individual platform. And with that being said, a very big hurdle that's in the process of being jumped over is attribution, where various platforms have their own attribution models built out, which is fantastic. And I can talk at length about the work StackAdapt has done to really accelerate our cross-device attribution. But there's still no one industry standard. There are multiple players that are trying to get there, but having a widely accepted universal standard for CTV attribution is going to make it a lot easier to justify investing in connected television as a whole, because it's going to make it a lot easier to say, we invested X in a CTV campaign, and this was our return. And what I'm personally most excited about is how the buying structure of connected television and the buying structure of linear television is starting to get closer together, where over the next several years, we can expect that buying on CTV and buying on linear television will very closely mirror each other. And that's going to give end users of a platform or agencies or brands as a whole a lot more control over frequency. And if you have more control and frequency over the connected television campaigns you're running, combined with the display, native, video, audio, or even digital out-of-home campaigns, it's going to make it a lot easier for advertisers, agencies, and platforms to create a much more unified consumer journey flow. And it'll be pretty cool to watch that from a platform that reports everything. With that said, we're also seeing a lot more major conglomerates come out with their OTT providers, which is just giving users more content to consume and drastically increasing the supply of connected television availability from the advertiser's end. With all of that said, those are some of the things that, at StackAdapt, we're really looking forward to in the connected television space for years to come. And we really now see connected television as a channel that helps you achieve your goals as opposed to a standalone exposure play. And that's what's made the channel such a largely growing part of StackAdapt's platform and something that's really been able to accelerate our industry as a whole. So with that said, I think that wraps up everything Mark and I wanted to talk about today. We'll pass it back to Ian to wrap things up.
All right. Well, thank you, Brandon and Mark, for that terrific discussion. So yes, we do have time for some questions. Again, as a reminder to everyone listening, you can submit these questions via the questions tab on the GoToWebinar platform. So let's see, to start, I have a question for both of you just around, revolving around teams that haven't integrated CTV into their strategy before. So how would you recommend convincing a brand client to test CTV for the first time?
Yeah, I can take one. I can take that one, Mark.
That's good.
All right. So again, I think, when we're looking at connected TV, although it's only been around for a few years, the measurement capabilities that we have in the connected television space now are a lot more sophisticated than what they were when, this channel came to popularity. And if you're looking to include connected TV into your media mix for the first time, I think it would be important to first take a step back and ask the brand what their goals were. And I think, obviously anybody's marketing budget is ultimately going to be spent to increase user acquisition. But we try to convince brands and talk to brands and agencies that are buying connected television for the first time of the benefits around buying CTV and how you can very easily attribute the investment you've put into a CTV campaign with its outcome. And if that's something that the brand and the agency is comfortable digesting, we would then put forward a media plan that very clearly illustrated where in that user's consumer journey we were going to be exposing them in the connected television space and why it would make an impact on the overall marketing funnel. But again, those conversations can sometimes be difficult to have. And our recommendation would always be to first ask what the goal of investing in CTV was and how we can illustrate and communicate that to the end brand who still might have some hesitancy in dipping their toes in the water, especially if they're used to buying linear television.
Got it. So another question for either of you to take, are clients starting to adopt CTV as an additional conversion tactic, and how exactly is that measured?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that one. So we are seeing that a lot of clients are actually starting to adopt CTV as an additional conversion tactic, primarily because it provides another entry into the funnel for a lot of different advertising campaigns. So we know, some of our traditional display native, those are typically displayed in situ on websites according to the context that we want to show them with, on the different websites that a user might be browsing. And we're targeting those people based on, a variety of different audience targeting tactics. But one of the big differences about CTV as an additional conversion tactic is that it's a format that commands attention. So again, we kind of have that captured audience there at the top of the funnel. People who are, whether they're sitting at their couch or at their computer desk, consuming content on a variety of different types of devices. And they are, they're really engaged with that content. They want to watch that content, but first they have to see these ads. Now, a lot of the time, these CTV ads are also forced view. So it ensures that not only, are we ensuring that those audiences are viewing our content, but we're able to convey the full message of that content as well. Sometimes that doesn't always come across with different ad formats such as skippable video or even display or native that a user may sometimes simply scroll past. So with CTV, it allows us to get that message out there, to convey the full message, and then connect that to the future actions that we might want a user to take. So in many cases, we've seen, where we have a vanity URL, probably in one of the lower thirds of the entire CTV ad, that clicks through to a part of the website that we might want to drive that user to. Other times, we can also even embed a QR code into that ad that is present for the whole time. Again, with those short attention spans, we know that people might already have their phone in their hand while they're, waiting for their content to load. So why not just open up the camera, point it at that QR code, and then drive that user to the website on their mobile device? And when it comes to measuring all of the conversions, as I mentioned earlier, so we have an in-house identity graphing solution that is comparing so many different parameters to ensure that we can take a look with a very high degree of accuracy that the user that we delivered that CTV ad to is very, very much considered to be the same user that might end up converting on their desktop computer or their tablet or their phone even after they've left the house. Now, we use a variety of things such as IP addresses, device IDs, and so on and so forth to do that. But it has worked really well to ensure that we're connecting things, again, at the top of the funnel with that CTV ad, all the way down to that conversion point that we ultimately want to drive our users to.
I would say even to add to that, a tactic that we've been seeing starting to get adopted more and more, and something we definitely recommend, is actually using retargeting audiences from the site itself to expose a user in the connected television space. We've seen that it can take anywhere from 20 and 30 impressions from first exposure to purchase, and being able to expose a user that's already visited your website on their television screen has been an awesome way to keep users engaged and keep trying to move them down that journey funnel.
That's a great point, Brandon. Thanks for adding to that.
Of course.
All right. So I also have a question about using CTV and its place in the overall multi-channel marketing strategy. So how can marketing teams use CTV in conjunction with other channels such as social, digital, audio, etc.?
Yeah, that's a great question and something I think Mark and I can probably tackle in tandem. But like a part of our presentation talked about today, the media world is starting to get a lot more connected, and it gives advertisers and brands the ability to see a much clearer picture within a platform of how your connected television campaigns are impacting other channels you're also running for a specific brand. So like Mark mentioned a little bit earlier, a really common tactic that we see leveraged in the connected TV space is using it for first exposure. And that's because you're going to be capturing somebody in more of a lean back environment and a higher attention window than you would in an online campaign, whether that be through standard OLV or display or native. And it allows the user to finish that 6, 15 or 30-second ad without the ability to disrupt that experience. And if you can control the frequency of that ad exposure, let's say you want to expose somebody 4 to 5 times in the connected television space, that's something you can do. And then when we've all agreed and deemed that the user has been exposed to enough connected television ads that they're now going to be deemed aware of the product or service you're trying to promote, it's a great opportunity to then transition that user from top funnel messaging exposed in the CTV space to more mid funnel or lower funnel messaging you might expose them to in the desktop or mobile environment. So whether that be targeting somebody who's finished CTV ads with native content, driving to more long form content, promoting the benefits of your product or service, or even exposing them to more mid funnel video assets in the online environment, we'll typically see an uptick in performance on traditional digital campaigns as a result of first exposing them to CTV as a whole. So when we're building out CTV OTT plans today, we'll almost never recommend running it as a standalone tactic, and always try to insert it in various stages of the funnel that are very connected with the rest of the media that you're serving, so that everything can communicate with each other and give us a very clear picture of how connected television exposure is impacting the rest of your media mix. Mark, I don't know if you have anything else to add there, but.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I were to add to that, I would also look at CTV as a tactic that can complement some of the work that other even platforms are doing. We know that StackAdapt works on a variety of different programmatic channels: display, native, video, audio, as well as CTV, of course. But let's say you're running a highly successful search engine marketing campaign. So you're driving some low funnel traffic into your site. And that that's highly qualified traffic. We can fuel our CTV audiences with a lookalike audience, for example, building statistically significant and relevant audience off of the seed that is your already lower funnel traffic that's hitting the site. Another way that we could do things, for example, is as a re-engagement tactic. So if we have some users that have been to your site and they've showed high intention but never quite converted, a good way to bring them back into that funnel is by, again, re-engaging them with a very high impact ad format. They're already familiar with the brand. We know that much. So getting their attention again to bring that back to the forefront of their mind can be a really good tactic to capture some of those users that you haven't quite lost, but who might have just forgot to convert.
All right. Well, I believe that is all in terms of questions. So we may wrap a little bit early, but before we end this, Mark, Brandon, is there anything else you have in terms of final thoughts or takeaways around CTV best practices moving forward?
Yeah, I could talk about it for a long time, but I think if we take a step back from, how to execute a CTV campaign, I think it's important to remember that people are still watching a ton of TV. It's just the way that they're consuming that content is changing. For me personally, I stream on a connected television device. I watch The Bachelorette on Tuesdays with my partner, and I watch football on Thursdays and Sundays. I don't consume that content on linear television anymore, but the overall consumption of TV is not going away. And I think it's really important that, as people in the marketing space, whether you're working for a platform, an agency, or a brand directly, that we all do our best to keep up with the evolving tech around serving ads in the television space, because it's not going away. And with the ever-growing sophistication of audience targeting and user identification from a behavioral or consumption habit point of view, TV is still going to be one of the most invested in marketing channels that exist. And it's on all of us as marketers to keep up with those trends and continue to serve people ads that are actually going to be relevant to what they're looking to consume.
Yeah, I think if I could add to that, Brandon, as Ian mentioned at the top of the hour, I work very closely with a team of account managers who are focused on flawless execution of our clients' campaigns. And one of the things that I always like to say is plan ahead, plan ahead, plan ahead. So, it's always a good idea to consider, the assets, the technologies in terms of like pixels and other tracking solutions that you're going to need to have in place before you launch the campaigns in order to have a very smooth and successful execution. But hey, we know that planning is as good as we can plan. Things don't always go to plan. So let's say you've launched a campaign without CTV, as part of your advertising funnel. It's never too late to have that conversation, not only with your client, but also with StackAdapt, with who you're going to actually deliver that CTV ad with, to see if there is a place and to see how we can help to make some suggestions or some recommendations that might benefit the overall performance of the campaign as well.
All right, well, we will wrap there. Thank you, Brandon and Mark, for your insights today.
Absolutely, yeah, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening as well, and have a great rest of your day.